Today I'll talk about the game Intruder from Task Force Games from 1980. Crews exploring the galaxy, they're picking up various specimens. They happen to pick up one that turns out to be an alien, which coincidentally this came out around the time of the movie Alien. Kind of plays similar, and actually the alien kind of looks like that. It's one of their pocket games, 8.5 by 5. So the cover art is pretty typical of Task Force games. Don't know that it aged super well, but yeah, it's kind of typical with how their artwork is. It's their Task Force game number 6. A little bit of theme. The intruder is an alien being of unknown power. During the course of the game, the intruder will move through the space station as both the hunter and the hunted. One or more players must cope with a monster that moves rapidly and changes continuously as it undergoes metamorphosis into a more powerful being, and possibly divides into 2 or more clones. And the components, first of all, the book, 15 or 14 pages of rules, like their other games. The map, the counters, etc. are contained within this. There's 54 counters, and they're okay quality. I mean, they're one-sided, like half inch by half inch. And it's a solitaire game. There's scenarios where we can play multiple players, but it's primarily a solitaire game. And having it one-sided is helpful when they do the randomized part of it. The components these are cages. These are dummy markers. It helps randomize because you don't know where stuff is, and that's what they're for. So there's 4 cages, 6 dummy markers, and then the crew, as they're going around the galaxy collecting specimens, they collect some that are that aren't violent, and they happen to look like cats and dogs and monkeys, but they're alien cat, dogs, and monkeys. And then there's the monsters or aliens themselves. And they can clone, so there can be multiple. So another part of the game is discovering what powers that the alien or the intruder has as they go. And these are markers for powers. And then other indicators for if there's the status of the self-destruct system, if that's being active. And also the life stage of the intruder, because at different life stages they have different abilities. And then there's the crew, so there's 3 different types. And there's 3 of each, 3 types. There's the command crew, captain, etc. 3 of those. 3, science officer types. 3 engineers. And then there's a variety of weapons that are picked up. There's 3 blasters, 3 darts, 3 gas canisters, and then a couple of them that you have to develop, but once you develop them, you get to use them, and that's the flamethrower and the prod. It's simple art, but it works out fine. So the last component is the map. It's a pulsar type thickness. This is a space station, and in the rules they say it's half mile across, which seems a little bit big compared to this, but that's what it says. These are different areas where crew and monsters and weapons can be. Some are just general and some have more specific. There's a command module where there's a panic mode, and then they go to there during the panic mode. There's a freezer where you can freeze the intruder. Arms room, obviously hero weapons, computer. And for some of these arms room computers especially, only certain units can access these and open the doors. Then there's other more generic ones like storage. There's a lab where you can keep the specimens of animals. Shuttle docks are, if things aren't going well, you can try to escape the space station. You go here, and then you go into the shuttles. These are, of course, the shuttles. And then there's maintenance, where a couple weapons, the flamethrower and prod, they can only be constructed by engineers, and that can only happen in maintenance. Corridors, so it gives you a sense of that's the layout of the space station. I'll talk more detail. So a big part of it is the intruder. As it goes through its different life stages, it increasing the amount of powers, and it's more likely it will attack. It might have clones, different likelihood of getting control of it, And you're not allowed to kill it early on, but as it grows you can. And probability of killing it. So it's the life stage chart, which obviously affects what the intruder is doing. Self-destruct. If this is activated, there's a countdown. At some point it can't be stopped, and you'll have to try to escape in a shuttle. As the intruder goes to new phases, it gets different powers. So you roll, 2 6-sided dice, and then you figure out powers they get. The number of powers it has are indicated by the life stage. Place to keep intruders killed, lab animals not being used, places to keep counters. And then here's the construction chart. Initially flamethrowers and prods are here, and then as you expend engineering time with the engineer to develop them, you can move it, and then when it's finished, then they're available for use. Sus components. It doesn't come with dice since it's like a pocket game. The outline of play, it goes in turns, and it goes an indefinite number of turns until there's you win or you lose. The sequence for each turn is the intruder and hidden counter movement phase, the first interaction phase, the crew movement phase, the intruder metamorphosis phase, the second interaction phase, and then the self-destruction sequence phase. During the intruder and hidden counter movement, the player goes through each of the inverted counters, and they roll to indicate which counter they're working on. They roll dice, and die rolls will compare it to the numbers in that compartment. Like, for instance, numbers storage has 1, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3. The number that matches that indicates which of the adjacent compartments the counter will go to. You roll. So you get a 4, and you're in storage, you'd move off to the 4th side. Intruder can never move through doors in the arms room, freezer, or a computer room, unless they would open for the express purpose of the intruder entering. The counters move 1 by doing that procedure. You do that for each. Then the first interaction phase, it does what is called interaction subroutines, and there's 2 phases. So if a player goes into a room where there's inverted counters, you flip over the counters to see what they are. And if it's a dummy counter, you remove the dummy counter. If it turns out there's an intruder counter that you turn over, this, and there's a crew in there, then you determine if the intruder will attack by referring to the intruder life stage chart, and the corresponding life stage will tell you the probability it will attack. And at the different life stages, it has a different number of powers, which are shown here. And you don't know what they are until you use them. And then once you determine any unknown powers, and given that the intruder is attacking, you resolve self-defense attacks. So when the intruder attacks, the player first basically reacts by self-defense. And for that, you refer to the combat results table. So they differ in that the items to the left are during the crew action phase, and the ones to the right are the ones in self-defense. Say if we're 2, for instance, and it was a gas canister, it would be, in a crew attack segment, it would be the intruder killed. If it's in self-defense, intruder retreats, for instance, so you refer to this. So that's how the first interaction works. You're allowed 3 movement points, and they can be put towards movement, where each crew can move 3 spaces, with the exception of the quarter. They need 2 movement points to move the access shaft, since it's tight. After the crew movement, the intruder does a metamorphosis phase, where based on his life stage, there's a chance he'll move up to the next level, and you simply roll. If you're just 2, you roll 6-sided dice. If it's 5 to 6, you move to the next level. So then you keep track of that here with a life stage marker. After the metamorphosis, you do the second interaction, and again you go through the subroutine as previous. Like if there's an intruder that you see there, combat, etc. So there's actions and there's functions. Actions are what you can do during the interaction phases, and functions are additional items you can do during the crew movement phase in addition to moving. So your 3 movement points, you can use 2 of those to move, and then you can do items such as picking up an object, which requires 1 movement point. The command officers can unlock arms rooms. Freezer can be unlocked. Computer room can be opened up by the command or science officer. The engineer can use 3 of his movement points if he's in the maintenance area to advance to construct weapons. And each time you construct one, you advance it along until it's finished, and then you can use it for both the flamethrower and the prod. That's a specific thing the engineer can do. You can drop an object, and that doesn't require any movement points. So those are functions that you do during movement, but the actions that you do during the interaction phase are into combat. You can attempt to cage the intruder. The player must have a cage, and if the intruder is asleep, he's successful on die roll of 1 to 5. If it's not asleep, you can only be caged at life stage 1 and die roll of 1 to 2. And then there are actions you can attempt to catch a lab animal, and die roll of 1 to 3 indicates it's caught, 4 to 6 is not. So, and you must have a cage to do it. The use of caging an animal is that you get them basically out of the play so that when there's a panic mode and you kind of shift everything around randomly, you can exclude the animal so that you can kind of more focus on the other ones to see where the intruder is. You can also start or stop the self-destruct. You can open airlocks, detect the intruder, which you talked about, prod the intruder and attempt to gain control. And that's on the probability of gaining control in the life stage chart there. You can inventory lab animals. It's basically turning over one counter in the lab animals and dummies not used face up to kind of see what's remaining on the board. Leaving the shuttle, turn the freezer, preferably if the intruder's in there, transfer ammo to a permanent cage. So those are actions that can be done during the action subroutine. If it turns out that during one of the combat phases in an interaction that a crewman or an intruder has been killed, with the exception of some circumstances, there's panic. And when there's panic, the crewmen move to the command module carrying their objects, and you basically randomize all the other stuff on the board so you lose track of where everything is. All the uncaptured lab animals, all face-down counters, all dummy counters, in the dummy counters discard box, and all intruders are taken and they're turned face down and shuffled, and then they're put, it says where to put those. Lose track of where everything is. Self-destruct, I guess that's fairly self-explanatory. You start the destruct and then it just keeps going by turns until it can't be stopped. And only certain crew can stop it. So if the crew wants to escape, they can go to a shuttle if things aren't looking good. They can only carry 4 crewmen. You can only happen in the second interaction phase. There's possibility that intruder will stow away. So in addition to the solitaire scenario, the solitaire game, which I'll show, there's several other multiplayer ones. One's the intelligent intruder, where another player basically controls the intruder. Return to Prometheus, where basically you have crew that are like Marines and they board the space station from different shuttles and then they try to take it over from the intruder. Science officer, where the other player plays, the science officer. So I'll show setup here. The scenario we're going to do is a solitaire game, since this game is primarily solitaire. So you win. The game is scored on a point system. Note that an intruder can only be considered permanently trapped if it is life stage 6. All powers have been determined, and extra strength is not one of them. Because if you have extra strength, it can escape from the cage. So these are the points. Human player tells the score. If it's positive, he's won. If it's negative, he's lost. Players are advised to consider self-destruction to be an automatic draw. And the game is over when all 9 crew members are dead, or when all intruders are dead, frozen in the freezer compartment, or permanently trapped in cages. That's the total scores. You take the 6 dummy markers and 6 animal markers and you invert them so you don't know what they are. Mix them up. Remove 4 of them so that only 8 remain. And then you add 1 of the intruders. Mix them up. That mix of markers done, you put one each of the storage. And the remaining 3 in the access shafts. So that's the setup of those. And then the rest of the items, you put 1 command officer in each, the command module, the mess, and the living quarters. You put 1 science officer each in the lab, the infirmary, and the mess. You put 1 engineer in each of the power, the maintenance, and the living quarters. And then you put, this is the arms area, you put 3 blasters, 3 gas canisters, 3 darts in the arms room. You put the 3 electric pods, electric flamethrowers in the engineering weapons construction area. Put the intruder life stage marker at its beginning location, and you put 2 powers on the unknown powers box. Since at life stage 1 you have 2 unknown powers. Then you set all the rest off to the side for now. So the lab animals and dummies not used, you keep them inverted and you put them in this box. So that's set up, then we'll get to play. So I'm a few turns into it, I'll show where I'm at, and then I'll do a turn or two to see how it plays out. So in the last interaction phase, there was a panic because a science officer got killed by the intruder. So when that happens, all the remaining personnel with what they're carrying goes back to the control module, and then the counters, the dummy counters, the remaining animals and the alien are all flipped over and reshuffled and randomly placed, and they're placed in the access shafts in the corridors. So that's the situation. And now I'll do the movement of the intruder in the random. So we'll do this one. He goes to storage. He starts going down the corridor. He goes in the lab. He goes into storage. 2's there, so he's going into access. Going into power. Going into lab. Going outside the lab. And then just staying there in the corridor. So that's the alien and hidden counter movement. So since it's hidden, we don't know where the alien is right now after the panic. The next is the first interaction phase. So first of all, I see if there's any intruders where the crew are, and there aren't. So then the crew can do an action. They want to go in there, but that'll be during the movement phase to do that. And then we do the crew movement. Okay, so only the command officers can open this up. So he'll open it up, and he's carrying a cage, so he can't carry anything else. And then he'll move in there, get a blaster. He's not interested in gas can because now we know. So since the setup, the intruder has metamorphosized a couple times, and when he fought the science officer, he was uncovered what his unknown powers were at that time. And one of his is immune to gas and to flame and a sleep dart. He'll grab a blaster. Well, there's only 1 blaster left. So there's really not much value in him going in there. So stay there. And then they can move 3. He'll move 1, 2, 3, and then also the guy with the blaster will go 1, 2, 3. And he'll just drop the gas. And Intruder Metamorphosis. Probability of metamorphosis is 6. He got a 2, so he didn't metamorphosize. If that's the word. Second interaction phase, that'll happen here. It's an animal, so there's not a combat here. It's a dummy, so we have to remove that from the board. And then any other actions. So they could attempt to cage intruder, catch a lab animal. So he'll do that. He'll attempt to catch the lab animal. But to capture a lab animal, you need a person with nothing bigger than a small item to catch them, and then next to someone in the cage can be there to put him in the cage. So a cage is a large item. A blaster and other weapons, except for the flamethrower, are small. So he can try to catch him. So to catch him, need a 1 to 3. He is not successful. They're done. Other options, you can do the self-destruct, open airlock, select the intruder, inventory lab, turn freezer, transfer an animal to a permanent cage, but you can't do that unless you're in the lab. So that's the end of that interaction phase. And then self-destruction, we're not doing self-destruction yet. So okay, so then we do the next turn. So the ones that aren't 4, so he'll go out here. And he'll, okay, goes to here. Stays there. It's there, okay. So that's the movement. And then the first interaction phase, so there's not currently any intruder by a crew, so there's not a combat. But let's see if they want to do anything. So he's going to try to catch that cat. And I believe that's successful. Yes, so he caught the cat. And in order to cage it, one crewman must be in possession of one cage, another in the same car must have previously caught and still holding a live animal. It doesn't say there has to be a previous turn, and he just did catch him, so I'm going to assume that. It's a little bit ambiguous there, but I'm assuming. And it's automatic, so that's what they did. If they had an engineer up there, they could produce those prods and move those up, but they don't have an engineer there. Then the crew movement. These guys want to get back to the lab to get this in the lab. It takes 2 movements to go across the shaft because it's narrow, so it's 1, 2, and then 3. He'll go down here to see what that is. He'll go here to see what's in here. And he'll go there to pick up an object, but that costs 1 movement point, so he has to wait to do that. Okay, so that's the movement. And then the intruder metamorphosis stage. He is 6 and he does metamorphosize, so he gets 1 more power, but it's unknown until he goes to battle because he is 5 total. And then the second interaction phase, he sees what this is because he's here. It's a dummy, it goes off the board. Sees what this is, another lab animal. And then he sees what these are. There's the intruder and a lab animal. So there will be some battle going on there. The intruder isn't covered, so let's see if he's going to attack. He'll attack on a 1 to 4. He doesn't attack. If he were to attack though, there'd be a self-defense, and then if there's no effect, then he would roll a 1 to 6, and on 1 to 5 he would kill. And that will determine his unknown powers before the other attack. So 5, 8, he's very strong, so that's his other power. The crew will attack. And on the combat table there's 2 different types. There's self-defense, which is on the right, and on the left is a straight attack. So he's going to attack with a blaster. He gets a 1. 1 is intruder killed. So there you go. That was surprisingly successful. So he was actually pretty lucky. I mean, he has a few turns into it, but he happened to have a weapon that there wasn't a defense for, and he's the one that discovered the intruder, and he got him. It didn't attack him, and therefore couldn't kill him. So that's how that played out. That's Intruder from Task Force Games from 1980. It's hard to find a game that's dedicated to solitaire, and this one does. It also has multiplayer options. It's got a lot of neat features as far as you have to figure out if you're going to dedicate your time developing units or who's going to have the weapon. Are you aggressively going to pursue the intruder or just kind of be more defensive? So it's a fun game. I give it a 7. Thanks a lot.